Okay, we'd like to convene this marine resources study for the environmental impact statement of the Makua Military Reservation. At this time, I'd like to call on Mr. Albert Silva.
Aloha, everyone. I was signaled out, and I have a commitment to our Hawaii. And our Hawaii is a very sacred place. We believe in Akua. And as we gather here this evening, we hope that everyone would be recognized and happy mentally and physically and one more time, spiritually. So, e pule kako, our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this chance to be here in this auditorium and discuss about our Makua and about our people. We hope that all of us would understand that we are all people and recognize this fact that everybody is trying to help make things nice. We hope, our dear Lord, that this will be the end results of a gathering that all people will be happy spiritually. Mahalo, aloha.
Mahalo. At this time, I would like to introduce Colonel Morgana, who's the commander of the U.S. Army Garrison, Hawaii.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Colonel Matt Morgana, the United States Army Garrison Hawaii Commander. First off, I'd just like to welcome you to tonight's public meeting, and also thank you all for taking the time to come participate in this public discourse with us. As you all know, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the Makua Marine Resources Study, designed to take a look at the potential or possible effects of the Army's use of Makua on the marine natural resources along Makua Valley. As I've stated in a couple of town hall meetings, these meetings are very, very important to the Army. We do take your input very, very seriously. The Army first engaged in this study and started the study in 2007. We had some additional time as we were working through the EIS. We decided to do additional study in 2008. Tonight's part of this process is to get more feedback from you all in order to allow us to improve upon this study. Our goal is to provide the best product and the best study and the best analysis we can about the effects of the Army's use on Makua to the public, and that's what we're here for tonight. I stand here and I say that in all sincerity. That's what we're here for. There's no other outside interest in this. It's designed just to get your feedback so we can take a look at it and provide comments back to you all as a part of that. So once again, I welcome you all. Look forward to hearing your comments, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.
My name is Ku'umealoha Gomes, and I'm your facilitator for this evening. Our recorder is Grace Clayton, and she'll be recording your comments this evening on Newsspring. We also have two court reporters, one sitting here in the front, and another one who is over there, Jenny, who, if you want to do a private kind of recording, she will take you aside and record whatever it is you want to say. Also, you have an opportunity to have written testimony. The table is over here with forms. Okay. This testimony period is going to be from now until 9:30. We need to stop at 9:30. We have to clear the place up. We have to clean up. And that's the agreement that we have with the DOE. Because we just have a few people testifying tonight, I think we're going to start off with 5 minutes a person rather than the 4 minutes. And if people are through, because I think what's going to happen is, although we just have 3 people, other people may want to testify. So we'll go to 5 minutes, and if we still have time, then folks who want more time can come back for another 5 minutes. I also ask that we be respectful, that there be no swearing, no name calling, no yelling, and I think for the most part, our community of folks, are respectful and have been able to do that. I reserve the right as a facilitator to call time, and I will. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Tetra Tech and Blues Alley folks who set up the displays in the back, and I think we had some very active Q&As earlier that kind of set some stuff up for this evening. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce David Howlett, who's sitting with Colonel Morgado. He's with Headquarters, Department of Army, Environmental Law Division. Okay, so I'd like to get started, and we have our first 3 people, David Hankin, followed by Vince Dodge, followed by Fred Dodge. David?
Aloha kako. My name is David Henkin. I'm an attorney with Earth Justice, and since 1998 I've had the privilege of representing Malama Makua with respect to efforts to secure accurate information from the United States Army regarding the potential environmental effects of proposed military activities at Makua, as well as alternatives available to the Army to accomplish their goals in a more environmentally and culturally appropriate manner. I may well go beyond the 5 minutes, but I'll sit down and come back up if there's time. When we initially started down this road back in, actually it was 1995 that I first came out to talk to folks on this coast who were concerned about training at Makua that had been going on for decades, and had asked for decades that there be a full disclosure of the effects on this community of that military training. The goal was to make sure that the public and the Army and public officials have accurate information about what the effects of military training are. Because in order to make good decisions, you need to have good information. And so there are those out there who have viewed our efforts over the last 13 years as being an effort to stop the military or secure a particular outcome. And I think that really if you take a look at what we're doing, it's trying to get accurate information about what the effects are. And of course everyone has opinions about what the future of Makua should be. But really at this stage in the process, we're just trying to put all the cards on the table so everyone is operating off of the same accurate information. When we had the opportunity to enter into a settlement agreement with the Army in October of 2001, we reached agreement finally that the Army would do a comprehensive environmental impact statement for proposed training at Makua. And as part of that effort, we felt it was particularly important that there be a thorough discussion of the potential effects on the health of the people of this coast who rely on the sea, who rely on shellfish and limu and fish to put food on their family's table. And we suspected, we feared, that military training activities in the past, and I want to emphasize that I'm talking about military training activities in the broadest sense, not just the live fire exercises, but everything that is associated with allowing those training activities to happen. That would include application of herbicides for fuel management. That would include controlled burns and all of the fire suppressants that are laid down. That would include servicing the trucks and all the potential leakage of gasoline and oil and all the things that are associated with that. Everything that's bound up with allowing the military to do its mission. We were concerned that activities in the past had resulted in contamination of the land that would flow down through the streams or the groundwater or the air, and end up in the nearshore areas where keiki play in the muliwai, where people gather food to put on their family's table. And we were concerned that if additional military training happened in the future, that likewise those ill health effects would continue and the cumulative effects of years of use would take their toll. And so we wanted to make sure that as part of the environmental impact statement, there would be a thorough, scientific, incredible analysis of whether these concerns were justified. And to be honest, we would prefer that the outcome of such a study be that there is no effect on the health of people eating food out of the ocean at Makua, that there is no harm to these families that live along this coast, for the simple reason that and the tough economic times that we're facing merely amplify the reliance of people of this coast on the sea. But the fact is that families for generations have been gathering food from Makua and putting on their family's table, and they will continue to do so, unfortunately, pretty much regardless of what a study would say, even if it said it was harmful. And in addition, the reality is that all an environmental impact statement does is provide information for future action. It doesn't require a cleanup if, in fact, military activities have contaminated or will contaminate the fish and limu and shellfish. So we would like a good study, a scientific study, a credible study, to give the military's activities a clean bill of health in terms of the effect on these resources. So for those, and I read the letters to the editor and such, for those who feel that we're just trying to play a game of gotcha and we want to prove that the military is poisoning the food supply, I want to give you assurances that that's not true, because that's not in the interest of the people of this coast. The interest of the people of this coast would be best served by a good study that shows that there's nothing to be worried about. Unfortunately, that's not so far what we have. What we have so far is a flawed study, and I'll get into some of the reasons that our experts have identified for why the study is flawed. But before even getting into those details, even with a flawed study, we have a study that says that there are significant carcinogenic risks to eating various of these marine resources that are beyond the EPA levels, and that there are significant non-carcinogenic risks. And then we have an effort by the Army to soft pedal these risks that come from a flawed methodology, but nonetheless show risk, by saying that as compared to the highly polluted areas off of the urbanized streets of Nanakuli, and as compared to the sewage outflow at Sandy Beach, these resources at Makua are no worse than those. As if that's supposed to provide some solace to the people of this coast who think they're going to a pristine area to bring food back to their family's table. So, number one, the Army has to stop putting spin on the results of its study and must admit that military activities at Makua in the past have contaminated resources, at least to the level of all of the urbanization in Nanakuli, where families change their oil and that washes down and goes into the street and goes down into the streams and goes into the nearshore areas. The same as all of the other urban activities in Nanakuli. The same as the sewage outfall that we have at Sandy Beach. Because it may be because the people who put together this study are not from here and therefore are not familiar with this area. But we need to bear in mind that since World War II, everything that has happened Mauka, on the mountainside of Farrington Highway at Makua, has been military. The military came in right after Pearl Harbor, took over the whole west end of the island. So every activity, whether it's live fire training, whether it's the open burning and detonation of munitions and hospital waste for disposal, whether it's the application of pesticides and herbicides and fire retardants and vehicle waste and all the rest of it, all of that is military. But for those activities, you would not have all of those human-caused sources of contamination coming into the nearshore waters. So the answer to one of the questions that is posed by our settlement agreement, have past military activities contaminated the resources on which people rely for subsistence at Makua? The answer to that question is yes. It's not a no, there's no incremental risk because compared to the other polluted areas on the island, it's no worse. The answer is, as compared to the pristine areas, we have human input of contaminants that is poisoning your food supply. So, first of all, we need to be honest about that. Then, we need to be honest about the deficiencies, the flaws in the study. First of all, and related to that, to the point I just made, is that all of the analysis of risk is done with reference to polluted by humans, environments that are polluted by humans. So rather than compare Makua, which but for the military's presence would not have all of these human sources of pollutants, with a pristine watershed, one, maybe like looking at the water quality off of Kaena Point, further up the coast where you don't have the water coming down from the military activities at Makua, they look at Nanakuli, they look at Sandy Beach. And there is no scientific justification for that. They talk about the EPA standards requiring analysis of background conditions and then looking at the incremental risk, in other words, the addition of risk on top of what the background conditions would be. We're not quibbling with that. That makes a lot of sense. But what are the background conditions in the absence of military activities at Makua? Well, the background conditions would be whatever natural sources of metals or other pollutants you would expect getting into the watershed. And in addition, maybe it is whatever chemicals humans have so spread throughout the earth that they are ubiquitous, that they are found everywhere. In the same way that they're finding dioxins in walrus meat up in the Arctic, things like that. Those would be the background conditions, the things that if the Army had not carried out its training at Makua and did not carry out that training in the future, would nonetheless be present in the food supply. We don't have any of that information, we don't have any of that data. Now, it's very important that they claim that the conditions that they're analyzing at Nanakuli and Sandy Beach are the ambient conditions. In other words, the conditions that would otherwise prevail at Makua. But there's no data to back that up. There's no reason to believe that contaminants that wash down into the nearshore areas from urbanized Nanakuli come up this coastline and get into Makua Bay. Our experts tell us that that bay has very little circulation. The studies that have been done indicate that those waters do not exchange with the waters down the coast. At least that's not what the available data indicate. And if you want to do a responsible study, a study as was required by court order, but more importantly by agreement between Malama Makua and the Army, before you make an assumption that these pollutants are ubiquitous, you actually need to do some current studies, some other inquiry to find out whether or not that's the case. So you're making very false comparisons between the results you get at Makua and the results you're getting in these polluted areas and saying that there's no difference and that if the Army weren't there, you'd still have pollution. I'm going to pause right here because near the end of one point and I see my time is limited, but I will come back up if time is available. Mahalo.
Mahalo, David. The next person is Vince Dodge.
Hello, Mike Rocco. I share that greeting as Uncle Eddie Gardner taught us that was a greeting not only to people but to all living things. And so especially tonight as we talk about our relatives in the ocean, to extend that greeting to all the creatures in the ocean. My name is Vince Kanai Dodge. I'm almost a 30-year resident on the coast, and I'm here tonight on behalf of my family, my grandchildren, and my friends and community that aren't able to make it tonight. I thank the call for really inviting us to improve this study and make it the best study. that was our goal from the very beginning, as David so eloquently shared the reasoning behind going to court and making an agreement with the Army to do the environmental impact statement so that we would have good information to know what is going on with our island, our valley. I was a fisherman, full-time commercial fisherman from about 1980 to about 1990, for about 10 years. I did a lot of fishing off of Makua. I'm also a diver, free, not with tanks, but free diving, and love to eat fish, as does my family. So this is a very, very important study, and I had on my paper, if we had done this study, what would it look like? But maybe I'll go to what would really make this study the best study. So first of all would be to test sea life that we eat, or that are long-term nearshore residents, like the puhi, the eel, like limu pepea, a nabi reef limu that grows on the inshore on the flat Papua reef, the Hawaii vana, which is I think the collector sea urchin, which lives offshore and seems to be a really good indicator of like silty kind of pollution. None of these three, and they were all suggested, were tested. So I think in order to make it the best study, we need to test some of those creatures that would give us, I think, good results, good indications. Really thank David for talking about the baseline and the background sites. It does not make very much sense to me that the Nanakuli Mulibai, which is Makai of the highway, and so it gets the runoff from all that traffic and from up Mauka and Nanakuli Valley, would be a good comparison, or Sandy Beach, which also gets a lot of traffic and then does have the sewage outfall, say 400 meters offshore. Except that it's a great fallback to explain why there would be contamination in Makua. If you test these other spots and they're contaminated, then you test Makua and it's contaminated, then it seems like then it makes sense. Oh, well, the contamination in Makua is, well, just like those other spots. It's from urban sources, it's from other sources. But as was pointed out by David, the only activity that's gone on in Mauka of the road in Makua is military type activities. And when you look at that list on the back about what could have caused the various contaminants and toxins, it's like the military covers all those activities. So it seems to me that it would make really good sense to test as a background someplace that's clean. If you tested a pristine place and you came up with a whole bunch of contamination, then we could say, wow, I guess that's just the way it is in the Hawaiian Islands, This is normal, so we don't have to worry. But now, that information is really cloudy. There's a time in a season, I think that, we want to test like after the big rains. Because that's when you get the washout, that's when you get, I see heads nodding, that's when you get those topsoil leaving the valley. There's contaminants in that valley from military activities over the last 60 years. We know that. We know the hot spots in 1992, that Halliburton study, which we didn't think was a very good study either, but it did show that there were these hot spots. And the hot spots weren't there in 2000 when they went for the fire remediation study. They were going to concoct hot soil for that study. So contaminants are moving, they're changing. It would be really important to know, are they moving downstream, which seems pretty likely, or are they being taken up by the plants, or are they, what's going on with them? I feel like the Army really owes us that information, or the best possible try at it. So, the testing was done in the summer, and the testing was done in late September, early October. If we just had a huge rain in December, like now would be a good time to test. Now would be a really good time to test. We strongly encourage you to go back and test some of those features now. To follow up, another way that the study could be much, much better is to follow up on some of the red flags. The arsenic in the limo, it was way, way, way high. I don't understand the numbers, but it was way, way, way high. And it's like, is that inorganic or organic? One is supposed to be harmful to us, one isn't. Can we please have a follow-up so we know what this thing is? I mean, that's just like good science. So right now, it's very incomplete information. In one of the composite fish samples, there was RDX, and RDX is a contaminant that was generated by munitions. That contaminant was not found in the fish samples from Sandy Beach, it was only found in Makua. And that was downplayed in the report as a quote-unquote false positive due to laboratory contamination. So I gotta ask, first of all, what kind of laboratory? There was a number of those statements, laboratory contamination made. What kind of laboratories being used to do this testing, number one? And then you call it a false positive. Like, this is the stuff that, is critical. Like, if anything is going to come out of that valley and come down in the ocean and get consumed by the fish, the EA and the shellfish, it's this one. It's RDX. It's munitions generated. And it's like, oh, it's a false positive. It's like, no big deal. It's a mistake. To make this study better is to go back and go catch more of those fish. And enough of them so you don't have to do a composite, which, as I understand, is when you combine all of them, But to test them one by one and see if we get a different picture of what the contamination levels are. One thing that I didn't get from reading was whether they were testing the whole fish or just parts of the fish. Because we know as fish eaters, how many people like to eat fish heads? Like to suck the heads, man, they taste good. We know heads and na'au, I like to eat the liver, I like to eat the heart, We know that the na'au, those parts, the contamination tends to settle in those in greater concentrations. So, what part was tested is really important and really critical. Okay, if I have time, perhaps I'll come back with mahalo nui.
The next person is Dr. Fred Dodge.
Aloha mai kako. My name is Fred Dodge, and we're back here again. We've been here for the 2007 study, and we gave suggestions, criticisms, if you will, and so did our experts. And as far as I can tell from the review of the study, most of those suggestions were followed. Mr. Henkin and my son Vince did go through some of those, and I'll try not to repeat too much. But basically, we spoke strongly against the control areas that were used. That is Nanakuli Muliwai, which the locals call stink pond, which is a good description, highly contaminated. And then the Sandy Beach area, which I understand had a military base near there during World War II, and also there's a sewage outflow further out in the ocean. So it's not the best one, and I can only say again that you need to go to more pristine places. Areas in the North Shore of Hawaii have been mentioned, North Shore of Molokai, even in a point with an improvement, or some of the North Shore areas on Oahu. So this needs to be redone. Again, high arsenic levels in Limu need to have a further test. Even though there is some evidence that arsenic is in the organic form, which is non-toxic, we don't know for sure. It could be in the inorganic form, which is very toxic. And we also need to know what type of Limu. Vince Dodge did mention a suggestion he had done before, and it should be followed. Also the type of fish. And again, the type of fish that were caught, plus other specimens. There's a mention that there was a shortage. They couldn't get enough helmet urchin and Kona crab, and I believe Samoan crabs, even though some of them were contaminated, or at least one was contaminated with RDX, which is definitely from explosives, and that was in the Makua area. So there should be more specimens taken. There shouldn't be a shortage. One of the effects of the shortage of specimens, and the population is too small, is that they meaning Tetra Tech, and this is not personal, by the way, it's not personal to the people here at Colonel Morgana and the lawyer from the Pentagon, more to Tetra Tech. This is trying to get a good study, which we need. It's been presented. We want it. We would love to have a relatively clean bill of health. We can't say we do with this study. It's a flawed study. It fails. And one of the things that was an effect of not enough specimens was that only a, quote, subset of the 43 chemicals of concern, I believe they call them, were tested. For instance, in the South Muliwai, Makua, the so-called Hawaiian prawns, and I've been told by people who know that there's no such thing as a Hawaiian prawn. They're from Malaysia, apparently. But anyway, what they call Hawaiian prawns, they couldn't test everything that they wanted to. And, you know, that's not a good thing. Let's face it. If you say you're going to do something, you're going to test these chemicals, you should get enough specimens. You've got to go back. If you don't get enough, you go back. If you don't get enough, talk to locals. I can get people that will know, who will help you find these specimens. It could have been a much better study, and it should have been a much better study. So lack of adequate sampling, lack of adequate testing, the comparisons to contaminated control areas, it's not good. I second the motion, if I can use that term, of Vince, that because of the heavy rains and flooding that occurred in December, and these, if you haven't heard, damaged the roads in Makua. I mean, it caused rutting that prevented vehicles from going over them. It brought down much soil and dirt, and we were told that presumably the contents and contamination of those washed out grounds, they headed to the ocean. And I could see where the gate of Muliwai Stream, no, not the gate, the fence of Muliwai Stream was pushed open. I see at least one person nodding. That there was so much that went through that it actually it allows this fence, which is apparently on a hinge on top, to allow and probably a great amount. According to the Army people I spoke to, there was an enormous amount that came down, and our accesses, which I coordinate with, were limited because you can't get to the sites that we had gotten to before. And anyway, the point I'm making is it did a lot of damage, a lot of stuff went down. That, I agree with Vince, is the time to test the Muliwai and the ocean. right number of fish and the right type of fish. Please do it again. I noticed that the report had multiple sections and statements about uncertainties, both assumptions and caveats. And that's good. A scientific report should mention, that, hey, we have concerns here. We didn't do everything, or we can't do everything, and there's lack of sampling and so on. But they should go back and try to get a better study. So my take on what I have looked at in this new study is that it basically has the same flaw as the 2007 study, which generated the new study, which, by the way, started on September 29th, 2008. And I believe they completed it fairly rapidly, although I have to go back and look at the field notes. I want to mention one more thing in the couple of minutes I have allowed, and that is just to quote from some of the incremental carcinogenic risk from ingesting fish, shellfish, and limu at Makua. And it also is in background sites. But at Makua, the shellfish exceeded the EPA standards for fish consumption. So was that standard exceeded with fish. It's the shellfish now, then fish, and limu. And again, we need to know what type of arsenic is in the limu. Also, that was the carcinogenic risk, what we call the health index. Well, we're coming to the health index. But the carcinogenic or non-cancerous hazard from eating the same things was also elevated greater than background. And that would be shellfish, fish, I'm going to try to keep this short because it's kind of boring but important. I'm going to skip the chemical migration pathways, but Vince touched on it, and I think that's important. The metals that were found in excessive amounts, hazard quotients greater than 1. Aluminum, 4.6. I won't go through the numbers. I'll just mention, I already did aluminum. There's chromium, cobalt, copper, iron, lead, manganese, selenium, vanadium. I can spell this for whoever's taking it down later on. And zinc. And these were the ones from the South Muliwai shellfish tissue. That's why the shellfish comes up as a contaminated species in Makua so often. As far as the near shore, okay, this is talking about ocean now. Arsenic, cadmium, chromium, cobalt, copper, iron, selenium, and zinc. I have been given a POW note. But if I could just make one closing statement, thank you, Mayor Aloha. And that is, you in the past had a range control officer, Tom Husman. I believe it's spelled H-U-S-E-M-A-N. Tom was there for years. I know many people knew Tom. And he worked for the Army, but he was a straight shooter. And I heard him give a report to troops that were going to train. This is during the time they were doing live fire training. And it stuck in my mind because here's a guy who knew the situation. And he said that military activity throughout the world is the greatest polluter of all the pollutions we have, industrial, car, whatever. And he said the United States has the largest military. Therefore, it is the largest polluter. And he said that not so much as criticism as to try to get the troops to be sure once you fire, go out and pick up the brass. Check on where you're firing, make sure it's in the impact zone and so on. He was doing his job. So with that, thank you. Aloha.